This is Hello Brain, presented by Brainovation Network. Welcome back to Hello Brain. I'm your host, Collin Adams. And as always, for today's show, I'm joined by Dr. Ramona von Leden and Dr. Dan O'Brien. So today's episode is a fun one. It's going to be part one of a two-part series, and we're talking about your answer to last Friday's question, what are your weekend plans? And that's sleep. Sleep is a huge topic right now in the world. It's probably everyone listening's favorite thing to do. I know for me, my favorite part of the day is when I get to lay down in bed and go to sleep. And some people might say that that's kind of sad, that maybe my life doesn't have enough going on, but that's not true. I just absolutely adore sleeping. So Ramona, I just wanted to open up by asking you this question, because for me, I can tell a huge difference between the two. Can you compare how you feel after a night where you've had some like really, really good sleep versus how you feel the next day when you don't sleep well?
No, 100%. I think that the most, for me, the most obvious comparison is if you have a good night of sleep, you tend to feel a little calmer. It's easy to make decisions. You feel clear. Whereas if you have a poor night of sleep, for myself, I always feel like almost manic, like kind of shaky. It's like I took too much caffeine because my body's like, oh, something's off. But definitely like foggy. I'm certainly more reactive. I don't feel like I can make decisions as quickly or as, with confidence.
Yeah, no, I think certainly Ramona makes some good points. Even I think clinically, Colin, I think you have a chronic lack of sleep, right? Just the fact that you know that you have that brain atrophy going on, you have that kind of glial lymphatic system, which kind of clears up the beta amyloid. So you're actually increasing your chance of Alzheimer's by having that chronic lack of sleep, right? Which is really interesting. So deep sleep is very critical, right? We know we have the alpha waves and the beta waves are very key, right, during that cycle. But now this lymphatic system being able to clear that out of beta amyloid, and that again could be causing Alzheimer's. There's all sorts of talk right around neuroinflammation. And again, this is why it's so important with sleep, not only for improved cognitive issues, but things of prevention, especially right now, of Alzheimer's. There's a lot of research right now going on with that. I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, Dan, since you brought it up, let's dig a little bit more into that, Colin, kind of spitballing off your original question about like what it feels like to have that bad night of sleep, but what's happening when you're sleeping and what does that result in? Like sleep, essentially, if you think about it, is really our chance to optimize our brain to get it ready for the next day. Just like you have a recovery day after a hard workout, you got to do the same thing for your brain. It's working for you all day long. And in my mind, there's three main things that happen during sleep. It's memory consolidation from short-term memories to long-term memories, right? You're taking everything you absorbed during the day and you're putting it away and like filing it away. It's synaptic pruning. So you're creating more efficiency in your neural networks. And as Dan mentioned, it's lymphatic clearance, which is waste removal. There's something really fascinating, which I only recently learned about the lymphatic system, is that when you're asleep, your neurons, essentially go into hibernation and they shrink. And that makes more space for the lymphatic system, which is your cerebral spinal fluid, to start moving around in your brain. And it's literally like the wash cycle. It's like you're putting your brain into the dishwasher, and the lymphatic system is actually doing its job. Where during the day, when your neurons are sort of swollen and active, there's not enough space for that movement to happen in an efficient way that actually takes the toxic waste out, like the amyloid beta plaques. It helps to clear kind of the garbage out.
Absolutely critical for clearing toxins, right? I think that's where the deep sleep, that slow wave sleep, becomes very, very pivotal. And I think the million dollar question is, how do we improve upon that? What are ways you think, Ramona, that people can get really better sleep? We're always living very active lives. I feel like we're always kind of, amped up. A lot of people are amped up, right? Figure out ways as we downregulate that nervous system to be able to get better sleep. Ramona, have you seen any really good solutions with that with people you've worked with?
Yeah, I think sleep habits, which I believe we will definitely get into with this podcast, sleep habits and sleep hygiene are so essential to creating that. It's, the environment that you're in when you go to bed. It's what you're doing for the couple of hours before you go to bed. It's, what you're eating. That's a big one. Are you consuming alcohol? Are you having really big sugary meals? Are you getting some activity before bed, like walking to help sort of set the metabolism where it needs to be? Are you sleeping in the dark and not adding a natural light into your sleep environment? These are all like simple but very critical things that the reality is you're not going to be able to do every day perfectly, right? We have busy lives. There's days, you were just talking about your daughter's soccer game, Dan, before we started recording. Sometimes your daughter's soccer game is going to go to 10 p.m. You're not going to be able to get that perfect night of sleep. You're not going to be able to get into, the exact same routine, but building a habit where most of the time you are doing that is the most critical thing we can do to sort of set yourself up for success with your sleep.
Yep. I mean, do you think there's almost things such as too much sleep? Supposedly they say Donald Trump gets about 5 hours of sleep a night. And some people think that, hey, 5 hours, is it 8 or 9 hours? Do we have kind of a sweet spot of a number that we should really shoot for? And are there consequences to having too much sleep?
Yeah. Well, we won't get into a political commentary, but I will say that nobody should be sleeping 5 hours a night. It's chronically detrimental to your brain. We do know that 7 to 9 hours is really the sweet spot, and it has to do with the sleep cycles, right? Everything in sleep is built on 90-minute cycles. 4 to 6 cycles per night is really the sweet spot in terms of what we need in order to function the next day. And those cycles also vary, right? So you were talking about deep sleep. Early in the night, you tend to have more of your deep sleep. So when you first go to bed, you're really sinking into that deep sleep, which is like the physical recovery aspect of it. That's more of where your body is restoring, your body is resting. But then as you get deeper into those cycles, the what's it called? The ratio of deep sleep to REM will shift. So for those who aren't familiar with it, so you basically go through these cycles of deep sleep and REM sleep over and over, 90-minute cycles. And early in the night, the deep sleep will be more of that 90-minute cycle. And then throughout those cycles, by the closest ones to you waking up, it's going to become more and more REM sleep. So the longer you sleep, the more it restores your brain. If you were only to sleep 5 nights, you might be getting the physical recovery that you might need, but you're not getting the cognitive recovery that you need. And that's really, kind of my category as to why you do need that. Now, you are right. There is such a thing as too much sleep. And I think that takes us into another topic, which maybe we'll cover down the line, which is in cases of depression, you'll see people who are sleeping like 12, 14 hours a day, that they're, the body doesn't want that. It doesn't run on that. That's not where it needs to land. However, you also see when someone's chronically sleep deprived, they might need to catch up on their sleep. We do bank our sleep in some capacity. And so if they've been under a stressful situation, I think like military personnel are a great example, where you're in country, you've had a lot of nights where you can't get any sleep because that's your job, and you get home and maybe you sleep for like a week, right? In that case, all right, get your 12 to 14 hours of sleep. But in sort of a normal, typical environment, yeah, that would be far too much.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, Ramona, in my medical training, right, it was always, early on years ago, right, where it was like, gosh, the more you stay up, the more you study, less sleep you get, you kind of have that go-getter mentality. And now we've seen quite a bit of a shift with medical residents, right, saying that, hey, we need to back off the hours the physicians, the residents are doing late at night just to prevent medical error. We know that lack of sleep affecting your cognition, your brain health, is leading to a lot of medical error, specifically at hospitals for young residents who don't have that quality of sleep that we need. So I think that has to be looked at a lot closer. I think it has among the medical community as they've realized something needs to be changed. But you're absolutely right. I think these different patterns of sleep and what sleep brings is very crucial right now.
Dr. Dan, I'm going to bring this up because it's an interesting anecdote since you brought up the residency. Do you know the story of why residencies were set up to have such long hours? Like the original.
I thought it was that go-getter mentality that's, the medical just get after it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I actually got the story from my favorite book about sleep, which was written by Matthew Walker, which is called Why We Sleep. But in there, they talk about this, right? Which is that you've mentioned there's been this shift recently, and in the medical community, it's finally like, no, this isn't good for our residents. It's not making them better. They're having medical errors. So we all think that the reason that doctors have these crazy long hours, especially in residency, is to train them to be able to handle it. Oh, you've got a 14-hour surgery. You need to be able to handle it. Well, no, that's not why. Because if we were arrested, we could handle that 14-hour surgery and probably do a pretty good job of it. So I won't quote the year because I can't remember, but it was, let's say 30s, 40s. There was a physician at Hopkins who a lot of things with lidocaine and cocaine. And he was using it for anesthesia, right? Like as it was supposed to be used. But also, he was also maybe snorting a little on the side. Like he was taking a little for himself. And he therefore found that he wasn't tired. And he was like, well, if I can stay up, my residents have to stay up too. They got to meet me where I'm at. And so he designed this residency program that was like insane hours because he's like, well, I'm not tired. I'm doing fine. You should be doing this too. And all of the other medical schools were like, well, if Hopkins is doing it, clearly that's what we should be doing.
Oh
That
no.
is the only reason. And then eventually,
Talk about going viral, right?
yeah,
Years later.
yeah. And so that's why I think in the last like maybe 10, 15 years, right, there's been this shift where finally we're looking at the data because we now know so much more about what sleep has an impact on and saying like, yeah, I don't actually think that this is helping. As you said, you see medical errors that are really problematic. And it's like, you're still obviously a resident's expected to work long hours, but you don't need to be doing these 24, 48-hour shifts. You should be able to, have a little bit more regular structure to the schedule. But that is actually the story of like where the long hours came from.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, not only in the medical field, but say for pilots, the same thing. Needing that sleep again, not being able to fly without a certain amount of hours of sleep. So it's so crucial right now. There's a lot of buzz. There's a lot of topics, a lot of talk on sleep and the quality of sleep. What are your thoughts, too, Ramona, too? There's a lot of people talking about, phone time before sleep. Put your phone down a certain amount of time before you go to bed. I've seen patients come in with, again, drinking alcohol late at night, having a hard time falling asleep, too. Something to kind of consider. Some of these habits that people do late at night, they're having kind of a hard time. They're still kind of amped up, right? People that tend to be a little bit more anxious, too, are still really excited as they kind of try to figure out to down-regulate. But might be a lot to unpack there. Maybe we'll start with that first question on maybe your thoughts around kind of phone time and where you see that, maybe just more healthy habits people can have.
Yeah, I mean, phone time really speaks to artificial light, and artificial light is pretty detrimental to our sleep. Obviously, we are creatures that were built around a circadian rhythm, which is the sunlight and darkness. And of course, we have artificial light, which has made our worlds, so much more accessible. But that also has the downside that we are using artificial light in our day way too late at night. So like for myself personally, in my home at night, I have no overhead lights on. I don't have fluorescent lights on. It's all soft lighting. Same thing in my bedroom, soft lighting, darkness as the day winds down, right? And this is to encourage the brain to kind of shift with the circadian rhythms and kind of respond with what hormones are being produced and what sleep stages you're going through. But yeah, I mean, phones, if you're up and you're doom scrolling, we talked about this in our ADHD episode, but doom scrolling, you're getting hits of dopamine. So you're waking your brain back up. It's actually the same thing that you see in people who are chronically sleep deprived. A lot of times they'll report feeling like euphoric because they're so tired that they feel euphoric, but it's actually hits of dopamine. Their body is doing everything it can to keep them awake because they're so sleep deprived. So it's using those same systems that we would for arousal, dopamine, stress hormones, cortisol, etc. So the same thing if you're on your phone, which we all know the phones are all set up to give us little hits of dopamine so that we keep looking at our phones, then what are you doing to your brain? You're just giving it all of these bits that are arousal bits rather than the opposite.
Yeah. I just checked my phone. Yeah, right. You're right. It's
Can't
the dopamine spike, right? Yeah,
it's compulsive.
There's going to be a lot of research, I think, still more with these dopamine spikes. You're absolutely right. This reward pathway. And I think we talked about in previous episodes, this addiction science, this cycle, how do we interrupt this cycle of addiction is really, really crucial. But to go back to sleep, though, you're right. There's just so many, I think, still more education, more awareness that needs to be done to be able to create that good quality of sleep.
Yeah, and you mentioned alcohol. Even one drink of alcohol, especially if you do it within like 3 hours of sleep, it reduces your REM time. So it fragments the cycles. So that beautiful pattern that we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, where you're seeing these like 90-minute cycles, alcohol disrupts that. And in Texas, of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't enjoy a glass of wine with dinner, but be very conscious of when you're having that glass of wine. And if you're drinking right before bed, like people have a nightcap, right? That's going to have the worst impact on your sleep versus like, oh, you have a glass of wine at 6 p.m. and then you go to bed at 10 or 11. It's going to be quite a different situation.
Yep. Ramona, can you talk a little bit about with the sleep stages, specifically with things like eating late or people who are working late? I've heard in the past that first 90-minute cycle, it's very important, and you can either say this is true or not. It's very important that it happens before midnight. Can you talk a little bit about
Uh,
that?
I I don't know about that one. I haven't heard that particular time. I would say that would be a hard thing to say definitively because if you're a shift worker, that just might not be an option for you.
Yeah.
I think it's more going to be based around what your cycles for the day are. If you are someone who's waking up perhaps at 6 or 7 in the morning, then maybe yes, because if you do the math, right, it's got to be before midnight so you can get adequate amount of sleep. Um, if you're a shift worker and you've set your life up so that your house is dark in the daytime when you're going to bed, as long as you're getting that adequate time and you've created an environment where you can do it, I think that's more important. That's an interesting. I've never heard the like you must get your first cycle before midnight before.
That's what I thought too. I
Um,
think it depends a
yeah,
lot on the person and the circumstance and maybe their chronotype,
yeah. I
what
will
they're,
say though, I thought you were going to ask me a slightly different question at the beginning, which was, eating late. And even if you do, as I said, sometimes we have to. Like I remember when I was a kid and I had, as I said, or now if I've got a intramural soccer game or basketball game that I'm going to go to, sometimes I'm getting home at 9 p.m. and I left at 5 and I don't want to eat before I go and I'm hungry when I get home. If you can take like a 10-minute, very casual walk, it drops your glucose levels significantly, which sets you up for a much better night of sleep. Even just a tiny little walk makes such an impact if you're eating late.
interesting. And I would assume that's after you eat.
Yeah, yeah. So if you have to eat late, try to just go out for a little walk, get some movement before you get into bed. Not like don't go for a run, don't like hype up your system, but like, walk around the block and just let the glucose levels settle down because that's one of the things that does impact. I mean, certainly for health reasons, and Dr. Dan can probably speak to this point better than I can about what going to bed with high glucose levels can do to your body.
Yeah, I
Yeah, no doubt.
chronically would, have problems specifically with REM sleep. And I think this is actually something that's kind of closely tied with ADHD. The ADHD brain is difficulty with REM because even when I'm asleep, I religiously track my sleep. And so I'm paying attention to things like all of these wake ups that are happening throughout the night. And I'm thinking, like, I felt like I was asleep all night long. What is it saying that I was awake all of these times and all these little white spikes are showing up? And what I didn't realize is that I live here in San Francisco in a busy city. There's sirens, there's people making noise outside, there's dogs barking, things are happening. I didn't realize that my brain was having little micro wake ups because it's hearing that. And because
Yeah.
my brain struggles already with where to direct attention, it starts to pay attention to that instead of staying in that sleep process. And so I was waking up exhausted every day. And I'm like, I got 8.5 actual hours of sleep. What is wrong
Mm,
with me? And it was all those micro wake ups. And so for me, what worked really well was I started to use a white noise machine, and that just kind of
sure.
provided me with that steady sound for my brain to pay attention to. And now I used to be like 20 to 30 minutes of REM sleep a night, which is bad.
Oh
And
boy.
now I'm hour and a half to 2 hours. And in fact, last night I got 2 hours of REM sleep specifically. And it's a huge, huge change. And so it's a lot of this stuff with making adjustments to your sleep really just starts with understanding what's going on in the first place. And
Yeah.
next episode in part 2 of this conversation, we'll talk a little bit about wearable tech and how to use that to really help your sleep better. But I think for things like people who are burned out, people who are going to sleep at a good time and still waking up exhausted every day, wondering what happened, it can be so useful to just have information.
Yeah, and I think something to kind of speak to that information, you mentioned it earlier was like, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with doom scrolling, but people who are finding themselves dealing with insomnia, you go to bed and you're thinking about all the things that you have to do the next day, right? The habits that you can create to help wind down. What you are trying to do is you're trying to shift your brain into a sleep state, or excuse me, a brain stage that Dr. Dan alluded to earlier that encourages rest and encourages sleep. So for me, my whole life I've always read before bed. That's just been what I've done my whole life. But I'm reading a novel. I'm not reading like some big textbook. I'm reading something that's very easy on the brain. And I probably am not reading an action novel. right? Like all of those things. And I pass out like so fast reading, for better or worse. Uh, Whereas I do think that a lot of times we're a society that is developed in a way where we're so quick to try to entertain ourselves. And similarly, if you watch TV before bed, we're talking about artificial light. Like even if it's across the room, you're staring at artificial light. Like your brain is not turning off the way that it is supposed to. It's not, you're not providing the hormones, the habit or the environment they need to really come out and do their job.
Yeah. And Dr. Dan, I'd love to hear from you your perspective on specifically being a parent. And, we'll talk in a second about the person who says they only need 4 to 5 hours of sleep and what I have to say about that. But for now, there is a specific season of life for people who choose to be parents where you are just not going to be getting sufficient sleep. Really, there's no way around it. You have to be up and care for the child. What was your experience in that stage? I think you've got 4 kids. You probably went through that 4 times. And
Oh
then
yeah,
can
for
you
sure.
kind of compare and contrast like your approach to sleep before all of that versus during and after?
Yeah, no, Colin, great question. So when my oldest daughter was born, I was actually doing my clinical rotations in medical school, right? So I
Oh
was
my
kind of used to
God.
it. I had a bit of a, I guess, an unfair answer here. I was kind of used to like staying up late and kind of that was all part of me. But looking back, if I'm truly honest with myself, Colin, the fact that I could have handled it a lot differently. I could have gotten a much more regimented sleep schedule to be able to handle that. The late nights, as my wife was up caring for the baby as well early on. So I think setting up those scheduling, events, just really in constant communication with your spouse. Again, to all the parents out there, we all know it's certainly it can be a very challenging time with the sleep. We all make it through, but again, looking back, I think just being really disciplined, really regimented with your sleep. I think and we'll talk about it later, with some of the wearables, the technology that we have, that you could become just even more aware and in tune with that, I think is going to make a tremendous impact. And I wish these technologies existed, 10, 15 years ago. I think it would have made things easier for me as well as for my sleep. Because looking back, I would love to be able to help residents, medical students figure out a better sleep schedule than what we kind of had. Because it was always who could do the most, who could work the hardest, grind, grind, grind. And that was the mentality. It was that go-getter mentality that I think that now we're seeing, down the road, that now we've got to work on down-regulating the nervous system. We've got to be really paying attention to some of these really important things. So for all the parents out there, I feel for you. I wish, again, just if I was honest with myself, doing it better as far as creating that sleep schedule. But there's room to help others, and that's why we're here, is to educate and create more awareness around that.
Yeah, and Dr. Dan, I think, we alluded to this a couple times. If you understand how to set yourself up for quality sleep for the hours that you do have, right? Because it is true. Like throughout our lives, there's always going to be some times when you have reasons, very good ones, why you have to sacrifice your sleep. But one, if prior to that reason, you are creating those good habits and you're trying to consistently get good sleep. And then if you're like, hey, if you're traveling, right? Even if you're not a parent, there's gonna be a night where you're like, man, I got a flight at 6 a.m. I can't go to bed at 7 p.m. I'm not going to fall asleep. But for that one night, for those 4 to 5 hours that I am going to get sleep, it's going to be quality sleep. I'm going to get the best sleep I can for the 5 hours I have. Right. And that's that habitual setup that you've been doing the work for. And then when you're a parent, yes, of course, it's not going to be one night. It's going to be several months of chronic sleep deprivation. But hopefully you have a partner that you can share that with. And hopefully when you do go to bed, that again, you have an environment that's conducive to the best possible sleep while you have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And really the fact that we talked about this in previous episodes, the circadian rhythm and the effect that cortisol has. And that's what we're seeing a lot of people with elevated cortisol, which leads to elevated blood sugar because their circadian rhythm is off and they're not getting that sleep. And that's leading
Yeah.
to different comorbidities, to obesity, to then, sleep apnea, to diabetes, to heart failure. I mean, there's the sequela of healthcare events that goes on. So I think if we need to build a good foundation for this sleep, because we want to prevent, we want to catch early, right? All these things upstream before some of these events happen. These bad habits get started with bad sleep.
Yeah. And I
That's
would say, Dr. Dan, too, that you said it right at the very beginning of this episode. If anybody needs a reason to focus on getting quality sleep, it is the biggest impactor on neurodegenerative disease. If you get crap sleep, like your risk of neurodegenerative disease is so much higher. It is not worth it. Like it's not just about your body living a long time. Like I want to be with it and up here until 100 years old. Like that.
No, you're right, because oftentimes you have that brain overload, right? Even people that, you're up all day and now you go to bed, but you have this brain overload. And there's actually studies that have been shown that could be leading to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. You're on that brain overload, and the rest and the sleep gives you time to your point, Ramona, clear out those toxins and kind of reset.
Yeah. The sleep when you're dead adage. I'm like, well, I'd rather be sleeping and healthy than alive and not. Let's just leave it at that.
I think we moved on from that concept. You're right. It was an earlier kind of concept, just like we saw with these medical residents. I think we're seeing a huge paradigm shift. People are just being much more cognitive of their health.
Yeah.
You guys have just provided me with just ample segue opportunities. So I'm really thankful for that. It's, going back really quickly to that cognitive load thing you were talking about, Dr. Dan, and how that could be contributing to neurodegenerative disease. The way that I would speak about that as a health coach in a really practical sense was this idea of cognitive bandwidth. And people, you have a finite amount of cognitive bandwidth every day. And a big part of where you start the day is how well you slept and the kind of quality of sleep you had. It's like charging your phone battery at night. We all go to sleep, and for most of us, you're plugging your phone in to make sure that when you start the next day, it's at 100%, you're ready to go. And in the same way, sleeping is recharging your brain's battery. Of course, it's doing all of those things like flushing out toxins and consolidating memories and all of that important stuff. But at a very, very, very basic practical level, it's just resetting, and it needs that reset. So, I want to categorize the people like parents and students in a different bucket than what this next topic is going to be, just because, like Ramona said, there are seasons of life where you just really have to commit yourself to something, or you're raising a child, or something's going on to where you're just not going to get enough sleep. So you can kind of focus on the quality that you're getting over the quantity. But there's another category of person, and these people wear poor sleep or lack of sleep as some kind of weird badge of honor.
Yeah.
They say things like Ramona said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. As an athlete growing up, I used to watch all these like motivational YouTube videos. And one of them was talking about how a pop star was like, sleep is for those who are broke. I don't need sleep. I've got a dream to chase after. I'm not going to sleep. I'll miss out on my opportunity. That's so toxic. Like, that's so toxic of an opinion. Sure, maybe if you get up at 4 a.m, like our friend Dr. Laura Davis, who likes to lift weights at 4 a.m. for some odd reason, she does get enough sleep though, so she works it out somehow.
She does. She goes to bed at like 8 p.m.
She does. That's wild, but really good. I'm super happy for her. That works.
And she's really good about it, because I've texted her after 8 p.m. and she does not respond. Like, she will not respond until 6 a.m. the next morning.
Yeah. See, she's locked in. But for the person who's saying things like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or they're like thinking they're going to miss out on this opportunity, or they're just push, that's one thing. And then on top of that, here in San Francisco, it's, we got the finance bros, we got the tech bros, we got the entrepreneurs, all the founders, we got Silicon Valley. All of these people know clearly what this stuff is. They're all into the biohacking world. They're all into the longevity space. And yet still, managers of these companies or C-suite people are literally driving their employees and their staff into the floor and through it with the amount of work that they're required to do and the amount that they're required to produce, or they're out of there. And so on top of, someone saying like, I don't need sleep, there's also like the people who like, if I don't stay up all night and work, I'm going to get fired. And that's real too. So like, first of all, I just want to say that, and I hope that someone's boss is listening to this and they change their ways. But why do you think that society has gone this direction and stayed there even Dr. Dan, with all of the knowledge that we have about the importance of sleep, not just for well-being, but also for productivity?
Yeah.
Yeah, great questions. I think, Con, I think it was just the society of more is always better, right? It's just, the more effort, the more time, the more focus that has just led people to continue to kind of push and push and push. And I don't know if we want to compare societies to say, well, if we look at Europe compared to the US on how things are kind of done, and some people will argue, well, the US is very, fast. Everything's quick, 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 quick. Where people in Europe will take time to walk and just sometimes enjoy certain things. And I don't know if it's a societal push that it's just again on our phones. We have everything in our hands, and it's just quick, 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 and we're not really taking time to take a step back, reflect, meditate, have that sense of peace, and everything's just done so fast. And I think it's like I said, it's that gunner mentality that we saw a lot in medical school, where people would just push, 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 and there was no sense of slowing down and really enjoying. And it's on to the next. Like, what is, Machiavelli wrote, and this was years ago in one of his books, the fact that, okay, I want this, now I want this, now this, and I want that. Like, it's never ending, right? It's like, I want this new car, then this new boat, then this new house, right? It's a never ending cycle of push, 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 to see what society wants us to achieve without really, I think, slowing down. So I think that's where that reflection, coming back to our brain health, our cognition, and just being more aware. And I think being more in tune of that we don't have to always push, 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 because what I've seen in, with certain patients, you do that, and that's leading to increase in diabetes. It's leading to increase in heart failure, various cancers, right? Our immune system then gets weakened, which causes the rise of certain cancers. So I think I'm a huge believer of immunity, keeping yourself in that homeostasis balance, that reflection, things such as yoga, jogging, exercise, I think are all great things. But it's just this society, I think, that it's this never ending push of what's next, what's more, what else can I achieve, without taking a step back and enjoying.
Yeah,
We'll go
you know what?
together, I'm sure.
In our very first episode, we were talking about why the brain, right? Why brain health? And something I mentioned in that episode was saying that, it's the forgotten organ because it's how we perceive everything. We use it. It's not right in front of us. I think sleep is in a similar way, because sleep, you're not being productive. It's when you're resting, right? To the working world, it seems unproductive. But all the studies show that when you have quality sleep, the level of productivity of your employees, when they have breaks, when they have rest, goes way up. And we see that in education systems too. Like in kids, if they don't have recess and you were just in class after class after class, their productivity drops, their ability to focus drops, like all of it goes down. So we know, and we've known for a very long time, like this is not news, that rest is essential for our optimal output. And even in like the physical world, people, there are people who maybe they run every single day. They're actually getting diminishing returns versus giving themselves a rest day, because the muscles need the time and they need that opportunity to reset and recover. And if you just keep pushing, and to Dr. Dan's point, in the clinical aspects, everything in moderation, right? If you're doing everything all the time so hard, it builds up and you never have the chance for the body to kind of reset itself and take care of itself. But I do think I think it's just like so many things, when it seems like it's not productive, we're like, oh, you don't need it. And I think, even like the military and things like that have really been a big trigger for that, where they're like, oh, you stay up, it's hard work. This is hard, so it must be good for you. This is the one thing I had this conversation. My mom was a police officer, and so she had plenty of that same experience where she had many sleepless nights. She did shift work, and her body responded better to like a shift work schedule, but that still gives you time for sleep. It's just in like a shifted schedule. And she kind of made that comment to me not that long ago, where she was like, well, I'm used to it. I trained to do it, like a resident would say in a hospital. I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, you might think that you've trained to do this, but ultimately this is one thing where we know the science is so clear on this. It has detrimental consequences to you long term. It is just not something you can avoid.
Yeah, and that's a really great point and transition kind of as we close here. I'm really excited to get into our next episode, because we're going to be talking a lot about the practical strategies of improving sleep and how to think about sleep. But like you said, so many people are are thinking a certain way about their sleep. They're saying like 4 to 5 hours is all I need, or, this just works for me, whatever this might be. So I want each of you to answer real quickly here as we close. What's one thing you'd tell someone about their brain that might cause them to start thinking differently about how they approach sleep?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in really quick. I
Do it,
think
Dr. Van.
that we know that if we look at our frontal lobe, right, we look at that executive functioning, we look at cognition. I think the ability to be sharper, more in tune with greater sleep is really impactful. And I think late at night, someone who comes from a medical background can work late hours. That when you're tired, go to bed, wake up early, maybe the next day, feel refreshed, and at that point, go after it, because that, again, during sleep, your brain had that ability to reset, process information correctly, and then you'll be sharper there in the morning, rather than having to pull up all nighters or stay up really late trying to accomplish something. Just get up early the next day. That'd be one of the messages I would leave the audience with.
I think I'm going to go the opposite route of I'm going to scare people straight. I think if I were to tell somebody one thing, it'd be if you don't sleep, you're going to have dementia. That's it.
Yeah. Sometimes 1 + 1 = 2, right?
Right. Like I this is not something I'm happy to go scared straight on this. Like, don't ruin your retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so important. The topic of sleep, approaching sleep the right way. We're excited to get into it the next episode with some practical strategies. We're going to be talking a lot about these similar things. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks again, Dr. Dan and Ramona, for joining me. If you've been enjoying the show, we would love to hear from you. We've had several episodes released now, so leave a review, drop a comment, or share this episode with someone who might not be approaching sleep well and you'd like to encourage them in a different way. So we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. You've been listening to Hello Brain, presented by Brainovation Network.